Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a week it has been. What a week. I mean, we passed 450,000 people dying from the coronavirus. And look, there are reports that it's even higher than that. When you go back and you look at some of the way things have been reported, you look at the fact that we spent almost 2 entire days kicking a crazy woman off of a couple of committees that Republicans don't care about anyway. And then you have her coming out today saying, I don't care about anything. Oh, you just wait. I've got nothing but free time on my hands. You'll be sorry. And then having this bizarre press conference where she still doesn't apologize and then doesn't even back up and basically says, I really meant it. It's crazy times. And then what's weird is you've got a couple other ones that are coming up who are trying to out crazy the crazy crowd. So lots of fun and excitement as you get these younger Republican women. I mean, and I used to think that once women were in charge, we'd be a little saner. Oh my gosh, no. Crazy train has left the station, and going to be an interesting 2 years as we watch the jockeying for insanity. But here's the thing: in 2 years, we got another election coming up, and a big one. And good news today here in my state of Pennsylvania. Our good friend, Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, has officially filed his paperwork to run for the open U.S. Senate seat. I think that is a great thing. I wish he would have won the primary last time in 2016 because I think he would have won. Hands down, I think he would have won. But here we are in this moment, moving forward. Hopefully 2022 will be his year, and we get 2 Democratic senators here from the state of Pennsylvania. And look, 2 good ones. John Fetterman's one of these guys who, I've known since he was the mayor of Braddock, a really poverty-ridden community out in the western part of the state, just decimated by, deindustrialization and, the massive, flight of capital from that region. And the really great work that him and his wife Giselle have done out there, and I give them credit. It would be great to have someone like him in the U.S. Senate. So good on him. I hope, I'm sure he will be on the show a number of times between now and the big election. But here we are. Good day today. 5:30 this morning? 5:30 this morning, the Senate, after a 15-hour vote-a-rama, passed through President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. It was a 50-50 vote, which meant Joe Manchin and Kelly Simona, and for all the talk that we've had about worrying about where they are, they made their votes. Kamala Harris, she broke the tie. 51-50 was the number in the House. The relief package went 219 to 209. It will now go to the committees in the House and the Senate, of which there are now 25 of them, and they will begin actually writing the legislation that they hope will get passed sometime mid-March. Joe Biden has said as soon as it's signed, it'll be a week before we get money into people's pocket. Mid-March, just so you know, the reason I think that's the target, that's when the unemployment benefits expire. That's like the cliff. So I think McConnell and his crew, they've stalled long enough. You had the Gang of 10 who went over with the meeting with Biden, and Biden was right to take the meeting. So anyone who says they should be talking is crazy. He was right to hear them out because you want this to be bipartisan. Because understand, it is bipartisan. Overwhelmingly, people want this help. People understand that we need it to get through these next couple of months. And I got to tell you, what I find really refreshing is that Joe Biden and the Democrats are saying we want to try. We're gonna reach out. We're gonna put out the olive branch. We're gonna put out the open hand. But what we're not going to let you do is snatch the olive branch out of our hand and beat us with it. And I think that's a good thing. Biden said that if I have to choose between getting help right now to Americans who are hurting so badly and getting bogged down in lengthy negotiation or compromising on a bill, that's an easy choice. I'm going to help the American people who are hurting. And that is the frame. That is the right answer. And I'm thrilled to finally see that he's learned the lessons of the Obama era. And I said this at the beginning. One of my fears is because everyone kept saying, this is going to be Obama 3.0. Oh no, it's not. This is the decider guy. This is a guy who came in on day one and said, "You gone, and you follow him too." A bunch of people have been shown the door, hundreds. And look, these were political appointee jobs. These were the patronage jobs, and they all go day one. No hanging out, no waiting around. Thanks. Good luck. Goodbye. Now, he on the $1,400, he says, here's what I won't do. I'm not cutting the size of the checks. They're going to be $1,400, period. That's what the American people were promised. They were promised $2,000, but I get the math. You can take the $600 away because that's what came before. Get it. But needed soon. Now, for me, I would like to see it recurring for a couple of months to help get us through the next several, because the job numbers out in January, not good. Not good. In fact, the economy only added 49,000 jobs. They're saying that unemployment declined from 6.7 down to 6.3%. That's because people stopped looking. And I'm not gonna go and say, oh, look, unemployment went down. No, it went down because people have been unemployed for a while. Now, economists were expecting 50,000. They got 49. Only a handful of people projected higher. But that's what happened. This comes after the December job numbers that were losing 140,000 jobs. So remember, and I gotta remind folks, when Obama took office, we were losing 1 million jobs a month. The economy was in terminal velocity free fall. We were in major crisis. The Bush folks had basically, run the car into the ditch, and it was Obama and Biden and the Democrats who were trying to pull the car out of the ditch. And Obama made the mistake of trying to, we need to get bipartisan. We need unity. It's a time of crisis. The Republicans will come along. They didn't, and they won't. So this is where I'm glad to see Biden and the Democrats going, look, we're going to keep working with you. But at the end of this process, we're still going to lay the groundwork for, if you don't come along and you don't give us a vote, we're just going to do it. And that's a good thing. Now, one of the things I'm a little distraught about is they've pulled the minimum wage back from it. They vow to move on it in the future. But this is again Joe Manchin, which I find really difficult to understand. But they're pulling back on this because, again, Republicans keep being dishonest. They keep saying, well, we can't afford a $15 an hour minimum wage today. Nobody's saying it would go today. In fact, the number is 15 by 2025. So there would be an incremental increase from now until 2025. Understand, the minimum wage hasn't seen an increase since 2009. We're getting to be 12 years into having no increase. None whatsoever. So, this idea that we can't afford to have an increase, we should have already had increases. And what I'm hoping happens is when they do finally come up with a number, and I doubt it's going to be as high as 15, hoping, pushing, working, but the Republicans will hold hostage. I hope they then do tie it to an index to inflation so that it never gets a decade plus before we get an increase. Understand, there's only been 2 administrations since FDR put into place the minimum wage that haven't passed two periods, the Reagan era and the Obama-Trump era. And both because Republicans have refused to allow wages to go up in both cases. So for me, a lot of organizing, a lot of stuff that has to happen and has to go on. There's a lot of interesting discussions going on around the relief package. I hear people on the left saying, we need Andrew Yang's universal basic income. I hear some people on the right saying things are fine. We've done enough already. They'll get through it. And I look at someone like Mitt Romney, who Romney's an interesting character, not somebody that I particularly like, but not someone I could particularly dislike. When he was governor of Massachusetts, did some really unsavory things, didn't raise taxes on anyone, but raised a ton of fees. Every fee that a working class person would pay nearly got doubled. I mean, he raised everything. So he didn't raise any taxes, but raised fees and fines and all of the stuff that you have to pay for your car registration, your driver's license, for permits, for this, that, the other thing. Every time you turn around, they're nailing you, they're nickel and diming you. But he also went and got the Romney Care push through, which, oddly enough, is Obamacare, because it was what the conservatives of the day were pushing as what their idea of healthcare was going to be. For those who don't remember history, when Hillary came out with her universal health plan with the little cards and everything, she had cute little cards. They were so wonderful. The conservative idea was, no, we need a business solution. We need a good corporate business solution with lots of personal responsibility. That was the mantra back then. And what the Heritage Foundation came up with, and what the Gingriches and all the rest of the conservatives were pushing, was this idea that everyone had to have private insurance, that everyone had to be in. You had to be forced to buy it, which is just hysterical when you then go, Obama gives them what they wanted, and they say no. We can't possibly, it's tyranny to make someone buy health insurance. It's crazy. It's crazy how far we've fallen from some bit of sanity. But this is where we are. So Romney goes and passes what the Heritage Foundation says that they want, which is now Romney Care, which, ask anybody in the state of Massachusetts, they're pretty happy. Covers about, I think the last number I saw was like 98% of the people are covered. It's accessible, it's affordable, it actually works pretty well because everybody's in. It seems pretty reasonable. So you fast forward to Obama going, well, that wasn't so bad. Let's try that. You remember the conservatives love to tell how much, states are the laboratory of innovation. Well, there was a state that was doing it pretty well. So Obama, in a torturous 10-month process of reaching out to conservatives and to Republicans, only to have them, take your arm and beat you senseless with it because they weren't going to vote for it anyway, got a limited thing passed, which eventually was Obamacare. And Republicans have been dead set against it ever since. So that's kind of where Romney's at. He's in this weird kind of, so I like some of the things, I don't like some of the things. He's come out with this idea, and this is not new. I think he came out with this idea a couple of years ago. Because understand, he's a religious guy, loves the children, loves big families, and wants to figure out how to pay for them. So he's now got this plan called the Family Security Act. And the idea is kind of a universal basic income for children. So if you've got kids, up to 5 years old, his plan would give each kid $350 a month, all year, on and on for every year, $4,200 per child. I guess the number works out to be. Kids 6 to 17 would get $250 a month, or $3,000 a year per child. It would cap off at $1,250 per family. So if you were to do all this, families could get about $15,000 cash from the government, in kind of like the earned income tax credit kind of scenario. They'd get these payments every month, like a welfare check, but not welfare, kid fare check. Let's call it a kid fare check. You'd get this money and you'd be able to buy food, get clothes on them, all that stuff. And then at tax time, then you would have to pay the piper like they do with the earned income tax credit. If your income falls below a certain level, they give you additional monies back. If you don't fall below that level, you don't get anything and you have to pay. They would do the same thing here. And the numbers he's got, go all the way up to $200,000 for a person, $400,000 for a family. Obviously, I love the fact that it's everybody, and that as you have higher incomes, we prorate some of it so that everybody's into it. And this got me thinking about, this is a conservative idea. So when I hear people go, well, we can't have socialism, can't have government giving people stuff, that's socialism, it's bad. You go, no, this is conservative ideology. This is Milton Friedman. This is the idea of a negative tax, the universal basic income idea of giving people money so they can be consumers. This is a very pro-business. At least that's what they want us to believe. It's pro-business. Looks like socialism to me. But again, I'm okay with it. And I'm okay with it whether you call it socialism or you call it, good God-fearing capitalism. It doesn't matter what you call it, just as long as we get food on kids' tables and we help families through this next period. Because understand what this is going to do. As we go through this next phase, because the pandemic is one crisis, and we're going to butt right into another crisis, which is automation and people just being canned across the board as we now find new efficiencies thanks to the pandemic. So as we lose more jobs, this is going to be a way for families to be able to at least support their children. $15,000 a year for a couple of kids, for 4 kids. That's not, or 5 kids if they're over the age of 5. That's something you can feed them on probably. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but I think it's an interesting proposal. And conservatives have had these proposals for a long time. One of the other conservative proposals that I actually liked was when a child's born, the federal government puts 10 grand into an account for them, and they just leave it. Just leave it. So when the kid's 18, that 10 grand will probably be 40. You could pay for college. You could do a whole lot of stuff with that. But we won't do stuff like that because it's smart policy. And those poor people might get something. It's crazy. Crazy times. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Scott Dworkin is going to be here. Stick around.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day the newly formed Building Contractors Council locked out 40,000 building tradesmen in Chicago. The Contractors Council was founded in opposition to the power of the Building Trades Council. Solidarity among the trades galvanized their ability to determine wages and working conditions throughout the city. Hard-won gains included the use of sympathy strikes, restriction of labor-saving machinery and apprentices, and work pace and production limits. In 1899, citywide building trades contracts expired. Backed by financiers, manufacturers, and engineers, the new council demanded the union abandon these gains and cut all ties with the Building Trades Council. The contractors cited the more than 20 walkouts at the Montgomery Ward construction site as but one example. The bosses were driven to destroy what historian Andrew Wender Cohn refers to as craft governance in the city. Incredulous, the crafts refused to recognize the Contractors Council or its demands. The contractors locked them out. They brought in 6,000 scabs to continue construction work throughout the city. Pitched battles continued daily in the streets between locked out tradesmen and scabs. Many contractors brought in cots and food to non-union workers, keeping them on job sites until completion. Labor-friendly Mayor Carter Harrison II offered to mediate but refused police protection of the scabs. The contractors built up their own private force. Then they injected an added racial dimension to the conflict. Among the non-union workers, some were black tradesmen, briefly hired as construction workers and job site guards. The lockout ended in a 1901 defeat for the building trades, whose ranks were decimated by 90%. The building trades would bounce back and were soon a formidable force in Chicago.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like Lou Dobbs is sent packing. It looks like the Lou Dobbs Tonight Show no longer going to be on Fox News. And Fox is saying it has nothing to do with the lawsuit for $2 gazillion by this company that, look, I got to be honest, this Smartmatic company, $2.7 billion, got a lot of people freaking out. But Lou's being shown the door, I guess. I'm just waiting for Maria Bartiromo and Jeanine Pirro to also be canned because they are also named in the lawsuit. And here to share some thoughts on, how far will this stuff go? How much of this lawsuit is going to clear out Fox News? And how many Bill O'Reillys does it take to get to $2.7 billion? Here to share some of those thoughts, our good friend Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
So that's the question. How many Bill O'Reilly lawsuits does it take to get to $2.7 billion?
That's quite a few. And I mean, the thing is, it's viable. And, they've lost, from what I see, they probably lost countries as clients. So the revenue that you're losing because they cite, well, look at what Giuliani said. I mean, this is straight up defamation to my understanding of the law in general. Just like that's why it exists, is so that people can't do this and ruin your company and get away with it. And with Fox News being on the hook here, that makes it really interesting because there's money involved. There's money to be had. And I mean, I don't know how far this goes, but I do think that Smartmatic's going to win some money.
And now you add that to the $1.7 billion that Dominion is going after. And I keep going, you're up to $4 billion. How many Bill O'Reilly lawsuits does it take to get to $4 billion? How many loofah sponges and falafels do you have to buy to get to $4 billion?
Yeah, I think it's going to get worse. There's going to be individuals who have been defamed as well. They'll separately sue. There's no way that they're going to do it just with their companies. Why would they do that? Because personally, they've also been tarnished. And so it's, that whole mudslinging, there's a difference between me saying Trump has Russian ties and he's made over $1 billion from Russians over the past 30 years. Do you want to know why I haven't been sued about accusing Roger Stone or accusing Carter Page because I was right. I was honest about it and I had the receipts to back it up.
They don't want to go through discovery for you to prove them right.
Right. And so, and that's why people are always like, I don't understand why they let you just rip into them or whatever. It's because we always brought receipts and we were always careful about how we said things. But you can't just come back and be like, well, I think, progressives are just, anything that Marjorie Taylor Greene would say, insert there. It's just going to get, I think it's just going to get worse because I don't know why people weren't suing under the Trump era. There was plenty of times where it's like somebody came up with a fake basis of something and they'd ask me a question and I'd be like, here's my attorney. And then they'd stop with whatever witch hunt kind of thing. I guess they were trying to go down that road. It's just like, I don't understand why people haven't sued sooner, especially Trump. So I'm guessing that's going to happen very shortly.
Oh, no, I'm expecting a lot of it. The reason you wouldn't have sued Trump while in the White House because he has unlimited resources as president of the United States. Now he does not. And especially after the next couple of weeks, if this impeachment goes, I personally don't see him being convicted. I see this as an opportunity to get people's stories out and to expose all of the people who created this environment for these crazy people to do the stuff that they did and the people who funded all of this stuff. That's where I'm hoping things go.
And the key element there is without distraction. And so you have people that are stuck at home due to pandemic and you have no Trump Twitter account. You have no Trump in the White House. You have no Trump lifting you up anywhere on social media. And so they don't have that weapon and they have no replacement. There's just no replacement.
Whoa. They got a replacement. They got Mike Lindell.
Oh,
They got the My Pillow guy. Did did
he's
did you see his whatever the hell that was?
the meltdown on TV. Yeah, he was trying to talk about the voting machines, and they had to read a statement because they're like, well, we don't want to get sued for more money because now you're just like trampling us, and they had to cut his mic. They had to cut his mic because he kept on, you're canceling me just like everybody else. And then my friend David Hogg went ahead and started his own pillow company. And I think that's just brilliant because Mike Lindell is supporting all this crazy stuff, and somebody like David Hogg selling it. I'd rather get a pillow from him, that's for sure.
Yeah, I said yesterday I will advertise that pillow for free on this show. If it's union made, it's made in the U.S.
Right.
I will buy one. I will buy a whole bunch of them, and I will promote them at every opportunity.
Absolutely. No, and I'm not. I haven't really gone pillow shopping in a few years. Like I don't know how that works with folks, but yeah, it is. What it is right now is people are starting to get their footing. A lot of people were tired after the insurrection and after January 20th, and everything's been going on. I think with the trial next week and some movement of justice in different ways, even small ways, and exposing people and connecting dots, like Roger Stone being in town in January 6th and with the Oath Keepers that was just reported right now. We're talking about, I'm going to go ahead and say that this trial is going to be about a terrorist attack that was committed against the United States of America by the sitting president of the United States, who knew that it was going to be violent, who intended it for it to be violent, who ordered for it to be violent. And so I think people need to understand it's not just his words. He literally was working with military people, the Flynn brothers and others, to stop the National Guard from coming in, not taking action. So, I mean, it was an attack on all of us.
No, I agree.
And so that's what I think what people are going to figure out from this. And there's not going to be any defense to this, but what people are going to have to deal with is that there was a terrorist attack on our Capitol, and it was perpetrated by the bin Laden of this terrorist attack was Donald Trump.
But you're right in this. And what I find interesting is this story has now come out about Roger Stone being surrounded by, this right-wing militia group. And you go, and my first response was, of course he was. And my second thought was, he just got pardoned like 2 weeks before, just got out of trouble. Recidivism is high with this one.
Right. I would guess that he came out and wanted a mob and probably didn't want it to escalate beyond that. But I would guess that he was heavily involved. He's been one of Trump's most trusted advisors for over 20 years now. So they've committed fraud for years now. They got fined in New York, in the state of New York, with the largest fine to date, the ethics board, because they had put out advertising that had needles and powdered substance and whatnot in relevance to Native Americans, to attack Native American tribes so they could get casino land. And so it was just basically they started a fake foundation and acted like it was research that proved that American Indians are alcoholics and do all this drugs and whatnot. And they were fined like $100,000, $300,000. So it was a lot of money at the time. So they've done this kind of thing before, and obviously the Brooks Brothers riot. He's done these kind of manufactured hysterics, and I think that we're getting smarter, not catching into it, because there's been so many insane things that Trump's done. Something that Roger Stone does is not like that outrageous anymore. People are like, oh, it's just Roger Stone.
Yeah, keep trying.
Yeah.
Better luck next time.
Exactly.
This time, good luck staying out of jail. So let's get to something that we're going to disagree on, because I know you're a big fan of going after Marjorie Taylor Greene and expelling her from education and labor. My position has been very clear. It shows what Republicans think of both education and labor to put someone like her on that committee. I think taking her off the committee just gives her more of an opportunity to play the martyr and be the victim. And as she said today, give her more time to not do anything and cause trouble. as where I would have rather had her on those committees. And every time we need to talk about an increase in public education funding, just go, and this is exhibit A of why we need more education funding. Look at this dodo bird. Listen to the craziness that comes out of her mouth. This is, in my view, a Republican problem. The Democrats should have stayed away from it. Now, you can disagree.
I think this is an American problem. And what I would say is to wait until next week for the trial, because there is a crossing of paths here in between why we're aiming for expulsion. There's more to the story. There's more evidence that's going to come out, both video that I'll release publicly and also other evidence that involves her planning around January 6th and then afterwards fanning the flames. She was one of the biggest pushers of January 6th. And I think that her involvement in that will be very clearly warranting of expulsion. And so that's why I see kind of like it as chess. I wouldn't go after for expulsion if I didn't think it was possible. I wouldn't go after it for fun. You know what I mean? Like that. This is not something that I have fun with. This is like the last thing I want to waste my time on is trying to expel a member of Congress and remove them from their committees. But in order to, there's different phases when it comes to these things. So we presented what happened before. We presented, nasty things that she said and done from before and how she defended that now. And that was the first part of it. And that got her removed from committees. And what's next is her involvement in everything surrounding January 6th. And I think that, again, when that evidence comes out, that'll maybe change her mind a little bit. But again, I understand what you're saying. I think that it's a big deal to a lot of people because it's the beginning of some kind of consequence to people that are basically not standing for Americans in Congress.
My problem is, it's not that I'm against the idea of holding her accountable. My problem is I just don't. I know there aren't going to be any Republicans who are going to. There were 11 that voted to get her off the committee. Fine,
Sure.
That was great. I don't see you getting to the 2/3 number to be able to take her off. I just don't.
Well, then I guess that they're going to be the party of QAnon. And we will, the spokesperson for the party right now is Marjorie Taylor Greene. The person who is the leader of the conference right now is Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right.
The person getting ovations in conference is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Kevin McCarthy's all over the place. Obviously, she's raising a lot of money off this as well. It's not going to viable Republican candidates right now. And she's raising money off the backs of Parkland students and Marjorie Stoneman Douglas students. And I mean, like, it's just getting worse every day. And I think I think if we didn't do something now, this would turn into the next Trump. This is exactly how it happened in the first place. And I think we have to confront it. But I think that there's so many people that are actually outraged about it, on top of the people in Congress, that there is a shot that she could actually be expelled. And if the dots are connected there, in regards to January 6th and any involvement in that whatsoever. But again, what I've seen already as of right now is that she should be arrested for incitement on January 6th. She should be arrested for helping to organize it and invite people to it. She should be arrested for helping to plan the hysterics. She should be arrested for doing the follow-up even after the insurrection. She should be, and these are crimes. These are actual crimes. Like, she was trying to incite violence.
Nobody's arguing with that, Scott. Nobody's arguing
Sure.
with if she committed a crime, she should be held accountable. This is creating an environment where she said something years ago, and look, it's despicable, it's deplorable, it's horrible, and should be confronted, but not by the Democrats. This is the Republicans that should have had the clean house in this. And my problem is to get to expulsion, you need another 60 members of the Republican Party to step forward to get the 290 number that you're going to need to expel her. I never see that happening. Hope I'm wrong. I hope there's a moment when all the evidence comes out in this impeachment where they say, yes, we've got a clean house, we've got to right our ship. I just don't see it happening. I don't see the Republicans as having any soul left in this. They've sold their brand down the road, and this is the ship that they're on. And so I just don't see it. But we'll see which one of us how this plays out.
it's not going to take. What's good about it is a big part of the effort is over with, and so what's next is procedural. And yeah, there will be a vote, there will be a presentation of new evidence that we'll present and that the Democrats will present, and we'll see where that goes. I just think that momentum's on our side. And when we were talking about, everybody always said you remove the cancer of Trump, but you still have remnants always. This is part of the remnants, and we have to. You're right. We have to confront it. We're looking at not. I want to be very careful about how I say this. We're looking at every legal avenue that we can approach to make sure that we can ensure that no insurrection ever happens again.
No, and we agree on that. We need to get to that point, which is why I think this impeachment is extremely important, and we need to have all the evidence out in front of us. And I want all of those people who wore the funny hats and wore the funny flags and all that. I want them called to testify.
Absolutely.
I want all of it out in front of us, and I want maximum jail sentences. I want a lot of that stuff. But I just don't see that the Republicans are going to help themselves. Which is why I don't think the Democrats should do it. So let me ask you a last line of questioning real quick, because obviously the impeachment's going to start this coming week. Do we get to move other legislation? Because all that's happened now is we've sucked all the air out of the room for the rescue relief, for any legislation to move forward to help us get out of this thing. Do you see the air being sucked out of the room for that stuff?
Nah, they're writing the bill right now. It'll take them 2 weeks to push that through and get the line items approved. I mean, there's a lot of procedural stuff that happens, and so that bill, the rescue bill, would not be until the end of this month or early March. But most of the programs that it continues to fund do not end in that time frame. So, I think that I'm not going to be able to answer your question, obviously, because it's tough. We're going to have to every day is a battle,
right? And
we will push in every way that we possibly can to make sure that we can actually get over this hump. I'm tired. You're tired. Everybody's tired. But the fact of the matter is, we can walk and chew gum. We can make sure that we have this trial and also are able to pass legislation at the same time and push legislation on the side at the same time. But I think what's important here is American people need justice. Yep. And if we're not going to have a public trial, this is going to be it. So let's make it one. Let's use it to the most that we possibly can in regards to finding the truth.
There you go. Good stuff, Scott. As always, I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, brother.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That was the day that Ida Bremen was killed while she stood up for the rights of working people in Rochester, New York. Ida was born in Russia to a Jewish family. She came to the United States fleeing persecution in her homeland. Her family came to Rochester because it was a thriving center of the U.S. garment industry. Seeking a better life, Ida's father joined the Brotherhood of Tailors. In January, garment workers in New York City had gone out on strike. Factory owners in the Big Apple decided to send work to Rochester in an effort to avoid the striking workers. Unions were forbidden in the Rochester garment industry. Union leaders from New York City came to Rochester asking them to stand up against the factory owners. The workers in Rochester agreed to support the strike, but they wanted union recognition, the 8-hour day, and a pay raise. Ida and her father were among the first to walk off the job. Ida joined picketers in front of a sweatshop on Clifford Street. The picketers were there to protest the shop's workers who were not taking part in the strike. The shop owner, Valentine Sauter, fired a rifle into the crowd of picketers. Ida was struck by the boss's bullet and killed. She was only 18 years old. That night, she was supposed to have her engagement party. The community was outraged. 5,000 people attended her funeral. Mass rallies were held across the area.
While no one was ever held accountable for her death, Ida's murder became a rallying cry for the striking workers. They continued to fight until April, when they won the right to join a union.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news. The NFL has opened up I guess they're going to open up all of the NFL stadiums across the country so that we can get medical personnel in there to give out the vaccines. Because guess what? Something probably we should have been planning on already. But to get people out, get the shots in people's arms, maybe even call out the National Guard to start doing some of it. Look, when I was 10 years old giving my grandmother shots for diabetes, and if a 10-year-old can wield a needle, I think we can train a lot of people to do this and get to that 1.5 million doses per day. Now, yesterday, you may remember, we were talking about the good old Ohio legislature and their SB 22, where the Republicans brought in, expert witnesses, tons of expert witnesses to share their hardships. There was the one woman who couldn't get the organic cheese for her cheesy bread. There was the guy who, evidently the mask caused his divorce. The kid who couldn't throw the dodgeball because of the hand sanitizer. Experts for expert testimony. No, seriously, it's crazy, but this is who they brought out. And I didn't actually see an expert, unless you consider the legislators there who were completely maskless. If you want to consider them experts, I consider doctors experts. I consider the people who have spent their lives studying this stuff and know a whole lot more than I will. I go after them. And that's why I reached out to a real expert. You may remember I talked about this thread back in November of this doctor who said that there was a guy coming in with Nazi tattoos into the ER, on oxygen, just basically holding on for his life. And, it almost started off like a bad joke. A Jewish doctor, a black nurse, and an Asian respiratory therapist, and a Nazi. And I'm going, I don't know that I could have been as good as these people and as professional as they are. But that's why I've asked a good doctor to come talk to us. Taylor Nichols, MD, emergency room physician, and, got to be honest, a guy with a soul. Dr. Nichols, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me, Rick.
I got to tell you, when I first read your thread, and we're going to tweet it out again to make sure everyone gets a look at it. But, I'm sitting here trying to put myself in your position, in the nurse's position, to see this Nazi coming in, the guy with the tattoos, and somebody who hates you on every vein, begging for your help to save their life, and for you to not just walk away from him. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, it's not that uncommon, unfortunately, to have patients who don't respect us, don't value us, or don't treat us well necessarily, particularly in the emergency department. But I'd say this particular incident it just highlighted that discrepancy between the compassion that we try to hold for all of our patients and the compassion that's given to us, or the value that's placed on our lives versus theirs, in the midst of, this pandemic, as you were talking about earlier, where people just don't even want to believe in us. They don't want to value us and what we're facing in trying to help them.
When this pandemic first happened, I went to my doctor because I forget what it was, but I had an appointment that I had to go to, and I asked him about it because we didn't know much at the time, and he said, look, he goes, we don't know everything about this, but what I'm telling you is follow the directions, wear the mask, wash your hands, stay away from people, and do smart stuff. He goes, we don't know yet. It could be nothing. It could be something. He said, but you know what? 6 months after they say it's okay to stop wearing a mask, who's going to keep doing it? He said, me. because I understand this stuff. And this is where, the other day when Jen Psaki was being attacked for saying, after we vaccinate everyone, we still have to do this stuff for a period of time. This is what my doctor told me almost a year ago.
Your doctor was spot on. And honestly, I was just having this discussion with some of my colleagues just yesterday even, talking about how crazy it is to think that a year ago we were intubating patients without masks on. To think that we were getting, every year I got sick. Every year, you're examining kids, for example, and you got to look in the back of their throat, and you get up in their face and you're putting the tongue depressor in their mouth, and they gag or they cough or they're screaming at you. And every year, inevitably, you got sick. This is the first year that I've been in medicine that I haven't gotten sick at all. And part of that is because we're wearing masks and we're asking our patients to take precautions too. So if they're coughing and they have a mask on, we're protected from that.
No, and this is the thing that,
and we're protected by the masks that we're wearing and the face shields that we're wearing too. And so your doctor was spot on. That's exactly right. I don't think I'll ever give up wearing a mask in my practice now.
and this is something that we've talked about. Is this the new normal going forward? And, I go back to a story of over the summer where we went, way up north in Pennsylvania, and I was wearing a mask in a store, and the woman was mocking me. She's like, "What?" I go, "Do you have any idea where I've been?" I said, "I'm wearing this mask not to protect myself, but to protect you, because I'm considerate of others." This is where I think we've lost some of this, because you're right. People come into you sometimes in their worst moments, and you take care of them, whether they've got Nazi tattoos or not. I think that's something that we should really respect and honor.
I appreciate that. I think you hit on something that's really important there, Rick, which is we've forgotten why we're even wearing masks, right? Your point is well said. We're wearing masks to protect other people because they don't know where we've been and we don't know where they've been. It's an exercise in compassion. And really, that's the hardest thing about it to me. The fact that we have to have a fight over this, that it's had to become so political about just doing something simple to protect other people, to just express that compassion to others, to say, I know you don't know where I've been. I know, that I don't know where you've been. Like, this is something that is simple to do to protect me and for me to protect you, just wearing a mask, keeping a distance. And so having to fight about that is so frustrating and disheartening, especially as a physician, when we've seen what happens. We've seen what what people are actually experiencing when they do get sick.
Yeah. So let me ask you about the guy that wheeled in with the Nazi tattoos and all that. Because if I'm you and I'm standing there, my first thought is, I know this guy was doing nothing to protect himself. I know he was probably out there being as reckless as he could be, and he probably infected a whole bunch of other people. And my mind goes to this spot. You're getting exactly what you deserve. And I know I'm vindictive and vengeful, and I'm gonna burn in a place that I don't want to go to. But that's where my mind goes when I see this, and I'm curious, what happened to this gentleman? I know you guys, did all of the things. You went through the thread, and I hope people will read it. You guys did everything you could do. What eventually happened to the guy?
I actually never. It was a really busy night in the emergency department. It was overnight, and I never had a chance to follow up on him. I know, we intubated him. I know he went up to the ICU. I know my colleagues took incredible care of him. I imagine he did okay, but I'm sure he was sick because we watched him decompensate rapidly in the emergency department. And I understand your sentiment. It's hard not to think through those thoughts, but being on the other side of the bed from the patient and standing there as a physician and as the nurse and as the respiratory therapist, we committed ourselves in our training to not judge and to just be there to take care of people. And so as much as one might think, like, how could you do this? It's just this is what we're there for, and we will be there. Our doors will always be open, and we'll be there to take care of anyone, regardless of who they are. That's sort of the mantra of emergency medicine is anyone, anytime, anywhere. Is come through our doors and we'll take care of you, regardless of who you are.
Right. Even if you're a
or
Nazi.
what you believe.
Yeah, even if you're a Nazi. And look, I'm not condemning you. I hope you don't take it that way. I'm actually honoring you and saying that you're a much better person than I could ever want to be, because I would have to be that judgmental. There was a lot of us when Herman Cain passed who were going, well, what did you expect? And I wasn't happy. I wasn't, I didn't, there was no glee. It's a sad, horrible situation, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I can understand that sentiment.
Yeah,
certainly.
So let me ask you this, because, we hear these horrible stories and there's just been so many of them. And, I see these stories of nurses wearing garbage bags and having to reuse masks, and we don't have enough ventilators or PPE. And there's all of these stories. Have things gotten better in your view over the last several months? Are we heading in the right direction? Because I want to believe that come summertime, we might be somewhere back to normal. I'm curious how you're seeing things.
From my end, at least, and I can only really speak from, I'm in Northern California. I can only speak from the perspective of my experiences and those of my colleagues who I've spoken with, but things are getting better. Supply chains, the initial crush of not having supplies, the supply chains being sort of blocked up, improved. We have more supplies, certainly not everyone. And there are still places where there isn't enough PPE or personal protective equipment. We do still have limited supplies because we go through it so quickly. We probably have as much as we always did before. The difference is that we're using it so much more rapidly. But it exists. It's there. I certainly feel safe in my emergency department, and I know my colleagues nearby do as well. But that said, if this were to go on for a significantly long period of time, I think there would still be a strain. But I think we're in a better place than we were before.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. One of my big concerns, and I've talked with other doctors over the last several months, is that once we do get to the other side of this, good folks like you are going to burn out, and that we're going to lose a significant number of doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals because of our own stupidity, of poor planning, of poor execution, and of people just being burnt out. Do you share that that common thought? Do you think we're going to get through this? And I'm curious how you see things down the road.
Absolutely. That's one of my greatest fears, honestly. We were facing physician shortages across almost every specialty, if not every specialty, before this started. And so if we're to lose people from every specialty, that shortage is going to be significant. I mean, doctors, nurses, et cetera, you name it, every position in the hospital, there's always a need across the country. And if we're to lose good folks from the bedside, that's going to be a problem. And that's one of my biggest fears. I mean, there's definitely going to be burnout or PTSD from this, and there's no way around that. I think we really need to ramp up our efforts as we start to wind down the pandemic. We need to ramp up our efforts in terms of support and making sure we have a good focus on mental health and making sure everybody is okay and that we can keep people in medicine who do want to stay.
Right.
I can speak for myself, at least. I want to stay. I love this job. It's been difficult. It's been hard to see, as you've mentioned, that society hasn't treated this as seriously as I would have hoped. But I'll be sticking around, and I really hope that I can be there for my colleagues to make sure that they stick around as well.
Yeah, because we know, like I said, I've heard just some horror stories, and being under the constant stress that you guys are under, and the constant cloud of, it just seems, it's got to seem almost insurmountable when every day the numbers keep going up. We're over 450,000 dead now. I hope we're coming over the peak. But still, the death numbers are still way up, more than they were at the beginning of this. And it doesn't seem like anybody's taking it serious at all. So I guess I'm curious, what do you want from people? If people out there listening, what's the message for them?
I think my biggest ask would be for folks to reach into the same sort of well of compassion that they have for their neighbors, as those of us on the front lines are extending to everyone who comes through our doors. And that means doing your part for preventative measures, like wearing a mask and keeping a distance. That means getting vaccinated when your turn comes up. The relief of having now had my second dose of the vaccine is huge. Knowing that I won't bring this home to my family and my community has been a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. And I really, really hope that as more people understand that this vaccine is safe, it's effective, or all the vaccines that are out right now, whichever one comes up, take it, because that's the way we're going to wind this down. And that's the way you're going to be able to express your compassion towards your community and towards this country, because that's how we're going to get through this. And one day, hopefully, as we ramp the vaccination up, we'll wind this process down.
Yeah. Let me ask you.
For now, keep digging in.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm right there with you, but I'm looking at these variants that are coming around that maybe the vaccine's good for, maybe they're not. And as I've had it explained to me, the fact that we've let this rage the way it has caused it to mutate and more of these variants that could make it happen longer. So is it possible that, with a vaccine, and if you are exposed to it, we could end up being, because I know some people are, I'm going to get the vaccine and I'm Superman. What I'm trying to get to is, once you get the vaccine, you still got to do some of the sane stuff, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's an excellent point. Thanks for bringing that up. So when you're vaccinated, still important, now that we know that, yes, the vaccines so far have proven to be effective against the variants that we know to exist here, but we still need to use precautions appropriately. And so once you're vaccinated, make sure you're still wearing a mask, make sure you're still keeping a distance, wash your hands, all the same things. Yes. Is it beneficial? Yes. Does it give you immunity against what we currently know? Sure. But we want to be sure that we can wind this down. And that means taking the appropriate steps to avoid outbreaks of other variants.
Yeah. It comes down to that little thing of, I know we love to say we're a Christian country, but we don't seem to act like it. That whole love thy neighbor thing, maybe we should be doing that. Which the weird thing is a lot of my evangelical friends are the anti-mask crowd, which is just twisted to me. But I hope we get through it. And with good folks like you on the front lines, I think we got a shot. And Dr. Nichols, I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate you taking some time for us, and good on you, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rick. Thanks for having me, and stay well.
Good stuff. Seriously, I don't know how folks do this. I don't. But God bless them, and thankfully that they do. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Hello, I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. A union of over 1.4 million strong and growing, AFSCME is gaining improvements in the workplace all across America. And right here in the Commonwealth, more than 95,000 AFSCME members make Pennsylvania happen. Highways, libraries, hospitals, parks, offices, prisons, classrooms, museums, courtrooms. You'll find AFSCME members at work in all these places and many more.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
Today's AFSCME members take on public service jobs as diverse as they are, not for the recognition, but for a better Pennsylvania. For more information, please visit our website at AFSCME13.org. Labor is changing, so is your labor union. We are AFSCME.
The Democratic Party establishment has a message for us progressives. Go away! That club of don't rock the corporate boat congressional leaders and their hired political operatives keep trying to purge progressive activists and policies from the party. Even when the candidates of these old-line forces win, as Joe Biden did, they can't seem to stop assailing grassroots progressives who supply the new ideas, energy, organizing, and votes that are the party's future. They're furious that we upstarts are making gains and pushing Democrats to be, well, Democrats. Just hours after polls closed on November 3rd, a group of timorous congressional Democrats joined in a game of pin the tail on progressives. They wailed that our demands for such egalitarian policies as Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, and criminal justice reform, quote, scares voters, and caused 8 centrist Democrats in swing districts to lose their House seats. One of the leading complainers, Representative Jim Clyburn, even insisted that those pushing a People's Democratic agenda would be the death of the Democratic Party. If, quote, we are going to run on Medicare for all, socialized medicine, we're not going to win, he proclaimed. Never mind that we taxpayers already provide socialized medicine for him and his colleagues. And never mind that he happens to be a top recipient of political cash from pharmaceutical profiteers, he is also wrong. Every single swing seat House Democrat who endorsed Medicare for All won re-election, tweeted Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on November 7th. Every single one. Indeed, of the 8 soft Dems who lost their House seats, all refused to back health care for all. This is Jim Hightower saying, polling shows that 72% of voters favor changing to a government-run health care plan. There's the party's future.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's some potentially good news. Senator Richard Shelby of Alabama. Reports are he is not going to be seeking re-election. That's a guy who's been in D.C. for 42 years. First elected to the U.S. Senate in 1986. That was a long time ago. And I'm not a term limit guy, but yeah, there's some time where you got to go. You got to go. And this is a good time. And look, I'm hoping come 2022, there's a bunch of people leaving because we're finding out Portman in Ohio is not running for re-election. Toomey here in Pennsylvania. There's some other opportunities for Democrats to pick up seats. Could be a good time. And here to share some thoughts on, well, what that looks like. I've asked our good friend, the professor, Brett Pransky, to come give us some thoughts. Brett, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
So good news, I guess, out of Alabama. Maybe there's a shot of Doug Jones, coming back.
That would be interesting. I mean, it has happened before, so it's not necessarily something that can't happen. I wouldn't consider it terribly likely, considering what happened last time with Tommy Tuberville, and he couldn't have been a worse candidate, and he still picked up the seat. That seat could be solidly red, regardless of who we run. But then again, Doug Jones is as good a human as you'll find anywhere, and I'd love to see the campaign.
Yeah. Now the weird thing is Shelby was a conservative Democrat when he was elected. In 1986, he was a Democrat. I think it was it 94, 96 that he flipped and became a Republican, but he ran as a Democrat.
Right, and I think that what we're seeing here is a number of folks who are, because I don't think this is the end of the retirements. I think we're going to see a wave of them, and you can't say exactly who or where or anything like that. But I think there's a lot of people out there now, especially with this this 90-degree right turn, for the Republican Party, which is hard to do considering how hard right they've been and how long they've been that way. Seeing some of the recent, really just dramatic shifts in party ideology and things I think there's going to be a lot of folks, especially long-term folks who've been around for a while, who are just going to check out.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be interesting to see how some of these races turn out. You've got some interesting possibilities, and Johnson for me being one of the top ones, simply because again, Wisconsin is a Democratic state if people are allowed to vote.
Right. Ron Johnson's seat is one that I would really take a really hard look at in 2022. And there's always a possibility that he knows this and he'll decide not to run and maybe open that up. But if he does run, we're looking at someone who's going to have a real big bullseye on him, just because he has been probably the biggest disinformation launderer in all of the United States government, with the exception of Trump, perhaps. He has repeated some pretty outlandish stuff that is not anywhere, rooted in fact or rooted really even in reason in most cases. And I think he's going to get punished for it because people don't like being lied to.
Yeah, I mean, that is the hope. And look, all of this is, we can have these talks about 2022, but it's all contingent on what happens over the next several months. And I love the fact that the Democrats came today, 5:30 in the morning, and pushed through the rescue plan, the $1.9 trillion rescue plan, to get it moving, to go the budget reconciliation path if Republicans aren't going to come around. And you got Biden coming out and saying, look, we want to work together. We want to extend the olive branch, but we're not going to let you beat the crap out of it with us either.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I think that's a lesson he learned from the Obama presidency. I mean, when we bent over backwards trying to get Republican support, and we allowed, amendment after amendment after amendment to the ACA, and negotiated for over a year, and then at the end of all that, after we watered down the bill, a couple hundred times, we still didn't get any Republican votes. And I think that's what this was gearing up to be too, was just obstruction 2.0. No, and I think everyone knows it. And I think even the Republicans, I think even their voters know it. So there's really no, you notice that the arguments saying, oh, Joe's not being very bipartisan, and what about all this unity stuff? You notice these arguments, they just aren't getting any traction. That's because everybody knows. I mean, everybody knows this is what Republicans are going to do. Everyone knows they're not going to bargain in good faith. Everyone knows that they're not really here to try to do anything constructive or to help people. I mean, you have to look at the motivations for why we do things. I mean, Democrats are genuinely trying to help people. And in order to do that, they sometimes have to argue with Republicans and push them out of the way. Republicans are more than willing to argue with Democrats, but their goal is to do nothing. If they win and push us out of the way, the next thing they do is not push through their version of something that they think is going to help people. They're just going to do nothing. They're going to sit on their thumbs for 4 years. And when you take the legislative agenda from the last presidency, what did they do in 4 years? They did two things. One, they passed a massive tax break that only applied to about 350, 400 families in all of America, at least in any substantive way. The rest of us who got a tax break, it's about to get rolled back. And then they tried to repeal Obamacare, which they didn't, eventually do. Other than that, there wasn't really any legislating for 4 years. Yeah, and so now we know if we lose this fight, the difference is we're going to move an agenda and try to help people, or we're going to sit on our thumbs.
And the thing is that Biden's policies right now, the things that he's doing, are popular. The polling shows that this rescue package, very popular. Doing something about climate change, very popular. Doing something on the immigration front, finally getting Congress maybe to actually do something after 100 years of doing nothing, a good thing. So for me, Biden's on the right path. Keep moving that kind of populism. Keep pursuing the right policy, and hopefully, in another year and a half, that pays off into electoral wins in 2022.
And I think that's a real possibility, because at the end of the day, while the right likes to label people socialists and so on, that's their basic, their famous attack line that they just use over and over and over. what gets ignored in that process is the fact that the progressive policies, not individuals, not necessarily people who are real easy to demonize, but the policies themselves are massively popular. You know, you take the healthcare for all plans, Medicare for all plans, things like this. They're all massively popular. Minimum wage increases, massively popular. We're talking 70-30 issues in most cases. So, which is why the attacks from the right are always against the individuals, against the people, against those, the people trying to forward those policies, because the policies themselves, you can't win that fight because people love the policies. So they go after the people. And that's why we have, candidates putting themselves on posters, carrying AR-15s next to pictures of legislators, of a different color. You know what I mean? That's why that stuff happens, because they need that kind of personal attack, because policy-wise, they lost this argument years ago.
Yeah, there are no policy chops there whatsoever. And I guess the way that they keep winning is by continuing to divide us. Where I think if Biden does the right things, if we do, and I'm not overly hopeful the minimum wage is going to be increased. They've now pulled it, I guess, out of this recovery plan because of the likes of Joe Manchin. But I'm hoping they go back to it because, as you've said, it's popular. Look at Florida, for instance. Florida went overwhelmingly for Trump, but went even more to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
Right. And that's the disconnect. If the personal attack lands, if you can find a way to demonize somebody, call them a socialist, call them a radical, call them, whatever you want. If that attack lands, then you can potentially beat that opponent, but you can't beat the policy, because the policy is popular regardless. You just have to find a way to make that personal attack more powerful than that policy, which we've been able to do because we haven't passed any policy. Now, once these policies go in place, I think that some of these personal attacks are going to be seen as as weak as they are.
Now, I'm hoping that because at the beginning I talked about Mitt Romney's plan to give every child, like under the age of 5, I guess it is, $350 a month. Every kid between 6 and 17, $250 a month, going on into the future, not just through the pandemic. But he's calling it his Family Security Act, something he's talked about before. And, this is a very conservative idea. Came out of, Uncle Milton Friedman's negative tax idea of giving people money. But it's socialism. I mean, I know the conservatives say, no, this is capitalism. To be honest, I don't care what you call it. I'm willing to call it God-fearing red, white, and blue capitalism. But we both know it's socialism. But I'm okay with calling it whatever you want, as long as we give families the security that they need. So I'm interested in seeing how Republicans address Romney's plan and how much support it gets on that side of the aisle.
Yeah, I'm interested in that too, because again, when you talk about buzzwords, and they usually have an ism in them, like socialism and so on. We have all kinds of socialism. I mean, if if your house catches on fire, you call the fire department. The fire department shows up. Why? That's because everybody pays for it. It seems just kind of odd that we demonize these things the way we do, because they are a part of our lives. I mean, it's in some sense, some of these things, especially when they're good policy, they kind of sound a little bit to me like people who are driving cross country to protest highways. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
No, you're absolutely right. But on the fire department front, I think it's Orion County, Tennessee. They don't have fire departments that show up at your house. They actually have for-profit fire departments, and that if your house is catching on fire, they will not put it out. They will water the houses around yours, just not yours if you don't pay your dues.
Yeah, that just seems a touch mean. You know what I mean?
Because a couple of years ago that actually happened. It was one of those things everybody's, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. It actually happened. So yeah, good times. I want to get your thoughts on the legislation put forth today by Earl Blumenauer, Ocasio-Cortez, and Bernie Sanders. They've introduced legislation mandating a declaration of a national climate emergency. Is this the right time for this? I mean, or are we in a national climate emergency?
I mean, it's when you listen to the scientists, it's hard to say we're not. I mean, I don't know anybody who looks at everything from the wildfires to the fact we have a major hurricane hit our coast about once every other week and things. I mean, the evidence is there. I mean, and the evidence is there not just to the scientists but to the naked eye of any person who's paying attention.
Yeah, Jewish lasers, Brett. Jewish lasers.
Yeah, no kidding. I could use one of those to shovel off my driveway right now. Because we got a bunch of snow this week, but it's hard to see how it's not an emergency. I guess you could always nitpick and get into the weeds on what constitutes an emergency and what does not. But as far as I'm concerned, the planet being on fire, you know what I mean, just that rates an emergency to me. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to declare it such, and then free up the decision-making power to do something about it.
And that's the thing, is to do something about it. Now, look, I'm not a scientist. I don't play one. I don't pretend to be one. I listen to smart people. Smart people give their opinions. Makes sense to me. The other side of this, it makes sense to me that, let's say, burning all the oil on the planet and sucking it all out of the ground and burning it isn't bad for the country. It's just bad for the air. Seems reasonable to me that if we can go to something renewable, if we can go to something that isn't going to cost me a fortune, that we can put, I got solar panels on my house. If we can do those things and do it in a smart way while creating good, solid union jobs so people can support their families, I'm there.
Yeah, and so am I. And I think what needs to happen, what's beginning to happen, and I think what we're going to see, hopefully, is the next industrial revolution here in America. Because whoever develops the green energy future, whoever creates that tech and manufactures that tech and brings it to market and is able to produce it in the numbers to make a significant change in the world, that's your next superpower.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's really got to be us. And given the fact that we are capitalists and we love to seize opportunities, and you have to see this one knocking on the door. I mean, this has got to be a great time to be an innovative mind in America. You know what I mean? And I think what's happening is we're fighting it because, some of these old dinosaur systems that we've had in place forever and ever are just, they're seeing the inevitable, and they're just trying to hold it off for a little bit longer and a little bit longer, but it's just not going to happen. They're going to lose. It's about time that they just change gears or get out of the way.
Yeah, wasn't it GM this week that came out and said that they're going to go to all electric vehicles by was it 2030, something like that?
Yeah, it wasn't that far away. I think that's fantastic, because imagine what you have to do in order to make that real. Because you just said it out loud. It's now a promise. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when Kennedy said that we were going to put a man on the moon. At the time that he did it, we knew almost nothing about how to actually get it done. We still had a lot more questions than answers, but a president said it, and then we went and made it happen. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I'm seeing here. I don't think GM has any idea how they're actually going to accomplish what they said, but now they've said it. So now it's time to put those minds to work to make it reality and make it happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bold move. I think it's smart.
It's actually 2035. I made sure it's 2035, but it's not just them making all their cars. It's the rest of society making the investments for the infrastructure. We're going to need charging stations everywhere. We're going to need to rethink and remold and rebuild our entire way of living. And, I get people who are attacking me. Look, I'm a 30 plus year Teamster. I don't like the fact that, 8 to 11,000 Teamsters and union people lost jobs building a pipeline that, to be honest, shouldn't have been allowed to be started in the first place. That was never going to help us. They were simply cutting right through the middle of our country to take the dirtiest oil possible straight through the middle of the country, straight out of our ports, to be refined in another country and then sold on the international market. I said from the beginning, if you want my support for it, build the pipeline to Chicago, refine it there, keep the oil here. If we're going to take all the degradation and all the damage and all the problems, we should benefit from it. Drop gas down to $1 a gallon, then you got my support. But until then, this is just making rich people richer and the rest of us sicker.
Right. I mean, that's absolutely right. And I think that's why that was a good decision. But at the same time, you have to recognize that, there are people who are going to lose their jobs. And this is the challenge of good governance, right? when you get off of Fox News, and you get off of Twitter, and you get off of MSNBC, and you stop listening to just only what the talking heads say, and you sit down, you have the real conversation. Yeah, we need to do this, and you know what? There's going to be things in there that are going to be painful. We need to do everything we can to minimize that pain and maximize the gain we get from enacting smart policies. But every time that we allow ourselves to get down in the weeds and talk about the momentary things, and demonize each other over the negative stuff that we know is coming if we're going to make smart decisions in the long term, in too many times we just get bogged down in that stuff, and it becomes a shouting match in the short term, and we ignore the long-term gains. We got to stop doing that.
No, I mean, it's not helpful. And what it does is, again, it's the wealthy in this country figuring out how to keep us divided and pitted against each other while they're profiting wildly off of us. And at some point, I'm hoping we're able to see through that and get beyond it. But for me, this idea that we're going to transform the future, and GM, good on them for coming out and saying that we're going to redo this. Think of all the jobs that we could be creating by rebuilding just how we fuel our vehicles. I mean, it's remarkable to me.
Yeah, it is. And, we have to consider the fact that as we move forward, and as, technology advances, and as we progress, not just as a nation, but as a species, some things, especially things that are bad for us, are going to go away as we get better at finding new ways to, say, get from place to place, or whatever the case may be. Most of the jobs that young people who are in grade school right now are going to have when they graduate don't exist today. We haven't created them yet. Now we're going to, and we have to go into these situations knowing that we're going to create those jobs, and that they will be there. And to some extent, it's a matter of faith, because you kind of have to believe, in American excellence. You have to believe in American innovation. So if we go after this harmful thing here that's killing us and killing the planet, even though many people are surviving on it and earning wages on it, if we destroy that to create something better, longer lasting, safer, and in the long term better for everybody, we have to take it on faith that those jobs are going to come back. We have to take it on faith that we're going to be able to create that better world that we keep talking about. But then again, that's kind of what America's all about. When you talk about the American dream, this is kind of, you kind of have to have that faith. That's part of not just being an American, but kind of wanting to be an American. You have to have that, kind of deep down in you. And I do. I think if we get rid of some of these dirty industries and replace them with smarter, smarter industries, that the jobs are going to come back. And I can't say exactly when, I can't say exactly how, but I do know it's going to happen.
Yeah, I see. I'm not a Luddite. I don't say smash the machines and going back to using two sticks to start a fire. But there's got to be a place where we ensure that people don't fall through the cracks, and we end up with a few winners and everyone else being losers. And that's where it comes back to smart policy. This is why government matters. And it goes back to something my high school government teacher said: government's about who gets what. That's it. And that's the reason that the rich people always participate, and the reason, sadly, that poor people don't. It's about who gets what, and we've been giving the very wealthy an awful lot. So for me, when I look at this transition, I look at something like Romney's proposing. Not a bad idea. There are other conservative ideas I'm not against. There was the Heritage Foundation, I think, came out about 10 years ago. It said every child born, we will put $10,000 into an account, and then when they turn 20, they can go to college or whatever, but they'll have that money set aside. That it sounds like a great idea to me. There are things that conservatives say they believe in, not loudly, but they said that I'm on board with. Okay, let's talk about that stuff. Let's make sure that families can keep a roof over their head and food on their table. I think we should all be able to agree on that, no?
No, I think that's absolutely correct. And to be honest, while it's hard to see past the partisan noise, especially now when it's such a fever pitch all the time, but there was a time when we used to behave this way, where we had different ideas about how to get to that better place, but but we all wanted to go to that better place. We all wanted to be a little better tomorrow than we are today. We all wanted better lives for American families. These were universal goals. Now I think they're goals on one side of the aisle much more than they are on the other, and that's a real problem. And I think over time, as the party kind of implodes and rebuilds itself, that's probably going to return. At least I hope it does.
No, I'm with you, but
this used to be the way things were done.
Right, because we're talking about policy. I mean, this is where when I started doing this, Republicans had ideas. Granted, a lot of them were bad ideas, but you could have a conversation about, just how bad, and is there a way to make this idea better? And for me, that was the excitement of doing this program and figuring out, hey, how do we make things better? The last 10, 12 years, the Republican Party's been basically soulless on the policy front. They were all about destroying Obama, and then these last 4 years, it's been really only about enriching the wealthy.
Yeah, it really has, and that's been unfortunate. And as soon as the Republican Party, kind of sold their soul to big money and corporations, and that became the driving force behind everything they do, that's when things really kind of got off the rails. And now we're in this moment where where Democrats have got some power, and we're moving things a little bit to the left, which is where they need to go. And our opposition is claiming that we're not inviting them into the conversation, when we are. You're welcome to sit down and talk about the best way to move this thing forward. You can do that, but that's not what's happening now. There's a big difference between inviting someone to sit at the table and have a discussion and having to pick up the table, carry it 100 miles and set it down in front of them. There's a big difference between those two things. They're asking us to do the latter. We're doing the former, and there's a disconnect about what's actually going on.
Yeah, good point.
They'd be welcome at the table, and good policy is welcome at the table anytime. But we're not going to sacrifice good policy just to cater to, your latest buzzword, which, this week is unity.
I'm there with you. Last question I wanted to ask you. Evidently, Louis Go-Go Gohmert, evidently he fined. He and Andrew Clyde, I guess, are the first members of Congress to be fined the $5,000 for bypassing the security screening because maybe we don't want guns on the House floor. Thoughts?
Well, I think they should have to pay the fine several times over. I mean, it's just not a sane thing to do. And I'm curious now, when they bypass the security monitors, do they get patted down after that? I mean, if they had a gun on the floor, would that be allowed to happen if they were willing to pay their $5,000 fine, or does somebody check and make sure, Mr. Gohmert, you're gonna have to come over here and I'm gonna have to check, make sure you're not armed, because that's a whole different story. If one is about inconvenience and he's just doing this to make a show of it, that's one thing. If he's doing it because he's actually carrying a gun on the floor, then we're having an entirely different conversation.
Now, that's something absolutely we should be looking into, and something I'll bring up with my my good friend Bob Ney when he comes up. But Brett, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. Good talking with you, my friend.
All right, thanks for having me.
As always, our good friend, the professor. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
So as the Biden administration prepares a whole-of-government approach to combating climate change, the Democratic majority will pursue a whole-of-Senate approach as well.
Democrats take control, pledge to act on climate. Automakers drop bid to block California's vehicle emission standards. Coal will be gone from the U.S. power grid by 2033, says new report. Plus, COVID lockdowns cleared the air, but also increased global warming.
What? All of those confusing stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Democrats are also in the position to do something about climate change. That's right, we're coming to take your straws.
That's right. Suck it up. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, good news because COVID cleared the air, but made global warming worse? What?
Yes, COVID lockdowns in 2020 led to temporarily cleaner air around the world.
It was beautiful.
It was. And now a new study shows that it also led to a slight uptick in global warming.
Why?
The drastic drop in fossil fuel use also caused a drop in toxic particulate air pollution. Those are teensy particles that are spewed from tailpipes, coal plants, and industry that helps create that brown haze over cities. Those particles also cool the atmosphere slightly by blocking the sun's heat. So yes, cleaning up the air will warm the planet a tiny bit, but it will kill a lot fewer people from toxic air pollution.
So pollution is needed to stop global warming.
No, pollution is not needed to stop global warming. Only stopping the use of fossil fuels will stop global warming.
I told you I was confused.
Big moves underway in the auto industry in the wake of General Motors' announcement last week that it will phase out production of conventional gas and diesel vehicles and shift to all electric by 2035. Toyota, Fiat Chrysler, and several other automakers announced this week that they will drop their legal effort to block California from setting more stringent fuel economy and vehicle tailpipe emission standards. That's a special authority granted to the state under the Clean Air Act that the Trump administration attempted to revoke.
So they were playing along with the Trump administration just to suck up to the Trump administration?
Yep. Ford, Honda, BMW, Volkswagen, and Volvo had already committed to abide by California's tougher standards. The new move signals that the auto industry may finally be ready to work with President Biden's effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous man-made climate change. The Trump administration in March finalized a rollback of Obama-era fuel economy standards, which the Biden administration says it is moving swiftly to rewrite.
Got it. So now they're sucking up to Biden.
In politics, Senate Republicans finally agreed to a power-sharing arrangement that formally hands over control of Senate committees to Democrats, who have a one-vote majority with Vice President Kamala Harris. On the Senate floor on Wednesday, Democratic Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he has directed incoming Democratic committee chairs to put climate change at the top of their agendas.
I promise that any action we take on infrastructure in particular will prioritize green infrastructure and the creation of green jobs and create many jobs, good-paying jobs. We will.
Good-paying jobs we will? Is he Yoda?
This Democratic majority will compel the Senate to urgently address climate change, beginning with work in all of the relevant committees.
The U.S. Senate also approved former Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg as Secretary of Transportation, making him the first millennial and first openly gay person confirmed to a cabinet post. But most importantly, Buttigieg will be the first transportation secretary to openly accept climate science and advocate for the necessity of building climate-resilient infrastructure. And that matters because new research shows that man-made climate change is causing sea level rise to accelerate, with oceans rising faster than scientists' most pessimistic forecasts. Revised estimates published this week in the journal Ocean Science show coastal economies around the world have even less time to prepare for increased flood risks than previously thought, even as many are already struggling to adapt to more frequent floods, storms, and tidal surges. The researchers warn that trillions of dollars worth of insured property now faces accelerating flood risks and suggests countries need to move even faster to cut their greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, good news for things that breathe.
That's me.
Polluting coal is on track to disappear from the U.S. power grid by 2033 as the global shift to renewable energy accelerates. That's according to a new report from Morgan Stanley. Coal supplies about 20% of U.S. electricity currently. The report projects that coal will be replaced largely by renewable energy sources that will supply 40% of U.S. electricity by 2030 and more than 50% by 2035. 35.
See you, Cole. For much more on all of those reports and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as I said, Louis Gohmert and his sidekick, this Andrew Clyde, evidently they're going to be the first House members to be fined the $5,000 for bypassing security. You've got the Texas Republican Chip Roy claiming he's considering legal action because it's an invasion of their rights, I guess. I don't know. To have to go through metal detectors like the rest of us. I don't know. But here to share some thoughts on, has he got a point? Should we be patting down the representatives, especially now in the aftermath of the insurrection? So I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So has this guy got a leg to stand on? Should representatives get to bypass the metal detectors and do whatever they want? I mean, is that okay?
Well, he can't sue because it's a House rule. So he can't sue. I mean, he can say he can, but he can't. That's the rule of the House. I find, having been out there, I find it amazing that they have to go through metal detectors because, when I was there, you didn't have to. In fact, if you went to the White House, they allowed you to bypass them and go directly to see the president, just as the president bypasses them to come into Congress. So it's been something that's been there for years, and it is strange. If you've been out in D.C. in the Congress, it's a strange thing because nobody ever had to question it. Now, I will tell you, Rick, at one time, you remember, of course, when Congressman Traficant was expelled from the House. That evening, I chaired House Administration, so I was in charge of the House side for the Speaker. That evening, there was a meeting that went down. Ted Vandermeade, who was attorney for the Speaker at the time, for Speaker Hastert, had a discussion with, I think, 3 or 4 of us in a room and said that he was afraid that Congressman Traficant was unbalanced and was going to come in with a gun. And, of course, they don't go through metal detectors. And they didn't know whether to ask him to go through a detector, and they decided not to, but they were worried. So I actually went up to Jim before he came into the Capitol, and I said, "Do you have a gun?" And he said, "What?" And I said, "I'm just asking you, do you have a gun?" And he said, "Well, no." And he came in. So I'm just relating to you that's the extent it used to go to even if they thought he did, they didn't have him go through the detector. So I just asked him. Right. But that's it's irrelevant what Gohmert thinks should be done or what was done in the past. It's a rule of the House.
Right. But here's the thing that gets me. I mean, how many times did you have people who were outwardly running campaigns on "I'm taking my gun to Congress"? No,
well, we didn't. That's what I'm saying. At the time, that was the only incident I knew of where they questioned was, he angry, et cetera. We never had an issue like that ever. Nobody said that they were going to bring a gun to the floor. Nobody.
Right.
It just didn't happen.
So was that a defense of we don't want another Bud Dwyer, or is this we don't want him shooting all of us?
Well, I think you mean what's currently going down.
No, I mean the Traficant incident. Well, they were talking about it. Were they afraid he was gonna do like Bud Dwyer did here in Pennsylvania, or was Hastert worried he was going to shoot him?
No, they were afraid that he was going to shoot someone.
Okay.
And I've never actually. It's the first time I've ever revealed this happened. But again, I knew Traficant well, and I went up to him and just point blank asked him, and he didn't go through the detector. That's the only time I ever remember anybody ever thinking that a member, would come in with a gun.
Right, because we've talked about this a couple of times. Because look, like you, I knew that representatives generally bypassed all security measures.
Right.
They had their little pin, and if you've got the pin on, you go right through. And it's like when I was going to the Capitol here in Harrisburg, if you have your press pass displayed, you can bypass the metal detectors and go right on past the security lines. Because they know who you are. Now, all of that has since changed over the last couple of years because of all of the heightened security measures and all of this this heightened insanity that you guys didn't really have back then. I mean, or am I wrong? Do you think it was as bad as it is now back then?
Oh, no, it wasn't. Nothing like that. Now, the thing we had to deal with, I will tell you, however, a lot of members didn't want to take the time, they were busy or whatever, and they would wave guests around the detectors. And we really tried to lean on them not to do that. Don't do that. But some of them would, because we kind of worried, about that. But we didn't have anything concrete except for the traffic ant situation because he was being expelled. But beyond that, no, we didn't. Nobody ever dreamed to do what's being done today because we just didn't have situations or members who would say, I'm going to bring a gun to the floor. So Gohmert should know, no matter how it used to be, it's a rule. And he broke the rule, and he's going to have to pay for it.
Right.
And the other congressman, you can't sue over. I love it. Everybody wants to sue today. You can't sue over a House rule. Doesn't happen. Can't happen.
Yeah, but it got him a story, man. Got him on the front page. He got a headline.
I'm going to sue.
I want to get your thoughts on Joe Biden was asked about should Donald Trump receive classified briefings. He said he doesn't think so. He said that what value is it giving him an intelligence briefing? What impact does he have at all other than the fact that he might slip and say something? And he also said he doesn't want him to have it because of his erratic behavior that's unrelated to the insurrection. I'm curious your thoughts.
Oh, I thought this would happen. In fact, I thought maybe I said this on your show, but maybe it was another one. Okay, I did. I thought it was your show at the time that he shouldn't be given the briefings, especially pre-impeachment process in the Senate. Then after that, Biden would have to consider as president whether he would give Trump after that point the intel briefings. But there's no reason to. And so the decision Biden made, I think, is going to be maybe not even disputed by Trump.
No, I don't think so. Because
I don't even think he will.
My view from the beginning was he didn't read them while he was president.
It's true.
He's not going to read them as vice president or as former president. And I fear that he leaves them on the table at Mar-a-Lago and someone picks them up.
Sure. I mean, it's a serious thing, and he just has not proven to be able to have them. I thought maybe President Biden would make this decision,
Or worse yet, they end up in the hands of Kushner or Steve Bannon, and then they go up to the highest bidder. But
right.
that's another fear down the road, and scary to me. I wanted to get your thoughts on this story that's coming out of the UK. Evidently, the BBC and the Chinese state broadcasting company, evidently they're at odds because the UK regulator, this Ofcom, is stripping the Chinese state broadcaster of its right to broadcast in the UK, claiming that they're controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And now there's this back and forth, this fight. I'm of the mindset we shouldn't have any foreign countries owning media in our country or any other. I'm curious your thoughts on this one.
Oh, I believe it to be that way. I mean, this is one area where the Trump administration cracked down on China, and I gave them a lot of credit for doing that. And because in fact, China, sometimes, like for example, in research, these aren't just research students; these are tools of the Chinese, communist government. And so I think what has happened with the BBC is a right thing to do. I know they're coming under fire, of course, by Chinese officials because China doesn't like it, but we did it also with them. We did it, in fact, we took the extent, and step to do it with their diplomats, claiming that, of course, they were part of the communist government and therefore didn't have certain rights. So, I mean, this isn't unexpected. China gets away with all types of things. You know that, and I do too. So, I think it's a good thing that BBC did.
Yeah, and now there's a story that broke today that during Trump's 4 years as president, our trade deficit with China has soared to the highest level ever, and our trade gap is just enormous. They said that the U.S. combined trade of goods and services deficit increased to $679 billion in 2020 compared to $481 billion in 2016. But we had all the trade war and we had all of that stuff that we went through, and it got us. He accomplished nothing with it. So I'm wondering how Biden cleans this mess up.
Well, I think that they're going to have to dig deep into the process of that trade deficit and why it increased. The reason I say that, I read the article, and where I would be skeptical is if, and probably free traders are going to say, oh, you see, fighting China doesn't have a reward. Well, obviously going along with them didn't have a reward. So I think that the Biden administration has to really dig deep statistically and look, exactly at the process of why we have that. Were there other underlying factors? So I don't think it's so easy that, well, we'll just stop the trade wars and everything will be okay, because it wasn't okay before that. So, I read that article. I'm a little bit skeptical. I'm a little bit of a skeptic, I should say, when I read an article like that and say, well, let's just reverse it. I think Biden administration will be cautious enough to look into why that soared. Were there some other underlying factors?
Right now, in the article, they're talking about how how our deficit with China is actually down, but we know what happened. We know they moved product through other countries because this is how they get. That's how they've always gotten around it. And this is why I think you have to pull the rest of the world into into holding them accountable, and we'll see what this administration does. I know we're only a couple of weeks in, but so far, you think we're on the right track?
I think we're doing okay. Look, there's going to be things that the administration has done that'll be controversial. For example, in the area of immigration, in particular. It'll be controversial if people start moving en masse to the border. Obviously, that's going to create a problem. That hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened. It may not happen. So who knows? But beyond that, I think that the things that the Biden administration has done is to show that they're taking action. People say, well, it's the most executive orders in modern time. Well, they are executive orders, and they're undoing some things that President Trump did. I think also, in the positive vein of the area of immigration, they're starting to undo a lot of different things that the Trump administration did in regards to legal immigration. And I think we're just going to discover the tip of the iceberg, things that we haven't heard that the Trump administration did privately when it came to legal immigration.
Yeah.
When it comes to restoring confidence with NATO allies, Biden's already outreached on the phone. He's already, as president, said that he's going to try to get some stability there. So in the foreign policy areas in particular, I think that which is his forte. I mean, that's what in Capitol Hill President Biden was known for when he was a senator. I think he's done a lot of really, really decent things there. So overall, in fact, Rick, I read, because I get the notices on my cell phone of, we have now been undone. The United States is almost finished already in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm reading it, and they really don't even say anything to back it up.
No.
I mean,
get those too.
There's not that much that he's done, if you look at it, that's taking anybody's breath away.
Yeah. No, I get the tweets and I get the notifications that
Right.
They're mostly fundraising requests. Save the country and give us $5.
Right, exactly.
And look, that's sadly where we've gotten. There are all these groups out there that want us to believe the sky is falling. And as you said, Biden hasn't done anything, overly, we haven't mandated martial law and socialism for everyone. Maybe that's coming, and I just didn't get the memo, but we'll see. I also wanted to get your thoughts on the big news yesterday. They stripped Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee assignments. I've taken the position. I think it's stupid. I think you should have just left her there, let the Republicans have to deal with their mess. But we've talked about this. Were you surprised 11 Republicans came over and joined the Democrats?
Well, no, looking down the list, I served with a couple of them, Mario Diaz-Balart, Freddie Upton. Well, by the way, we called him Freddie, so that's not disrespectful to him, from Michigan. Chris Smith of New Jersey. They were members that when issues came up, Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, that were really out there in the sense of an open situation that could be bipartisan in normal cases, they would go that direction. So they didn't surprise me, with that particular issue at all.
Yeah, I mean, was it the right thing to do, you think?
Oh, I mean, I don't think it should have been done myself, personally, for a few reasons. Number one, politically, let the Republicans have to choose what they want to do with her, just like they did with former Congressman King. Let them have to choose. Just like the Democrats would have to choose, what they would want to do if they have a problem. Number two, I think that it goes down a bit of a dangerous path for the Congress. The fact that, no matter how terrible they are, I mean, I think the things she said were terrible. And there's at least one Democrat that I think has said things that are terrible. But if I was there, I don't think I would ever want to vote either one of them off of a committee because I don't care for what they said or I don't like them.
Yeah, I just think it was you've sucked the air out of the room the last 2 days where we should have been talking about Biden's rescue plan, the $1.9 trillion. The Democrats rightfully and good on them in the Senate moved at 5:30 this morning. We should have been talking about that. We should have been talking about the fact that not one Republican voted for it. So I think you gave them a lot of cover.
Oh, I think so. And again, they also spared the minority leader, Congressman McCarthy of California. They spared him a lot of heartburn for what he would have had to have done to make a decision to actually not put her on the committee due to her statements.
No, I mean, but for me, and I know you're, as a former Republican, you'll probably push back, but the fact that they put her on education and labor tells me how little they think of those two committees.
Oh, I think the fact that, again, the fact that they couldn't tone her down, rein her in, bring some common sense to her says a lot. She said some really bad things, dumb things, conspiracy theory things, the lasers from outer space. I mean, we could go on and on about it. But again, I don't like when I was there when members would say certain things, but taking them off the committees, again, they should have let that been in the hands of the Republicans, and they would have sweated over it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. But her tweet this morning, I don't know if you saw it. She tweeted out, "I woke up early this morning, literally laughing, thinking about what a bunch of morons the Democrats plus 11 are for giving someone like me free time. In this Democrat tyrannical government, conservative Republicans have no say in committees anyway. Oh, this is going to be fun."
Yeah, see, I mean, even the way she handled it, she obviously should have handled it in a different way with her constituents.
Yeah, and now she's going to be the martyr. And, I look at the response she's got. I mean, it's just ramping up this division. And now you've given her a bigger platform where most people just said, she's a kook, leave her alone.
Right.
Now
as they did with King. I mean, I was asked one time on live TV about him, and I said, something's wrong with him. That was my answer. They said, well, what's up with him? I said, something's wrong with him.
Something's wrong.
And they had to deal with him. And they did strip him of his committees internally. The Republicans did.
They did. It wasn't the Democrats.
That's right. They did. Yeah, that's right.
There you go. Anyway, Bob, I appreciate the time. Always great stuff. Thank you. Good stuff.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That was the day that Ida Bremen was killed while she stood up for the rights of working people in Rochester, New York. Ida was born in Russia to a Jewish family. She came to the United States fleeing persecution in her homeland. Her family came to Rochester because it was a thriving center of the U.S. garment industry. Seeking a better life, Ida's father joined the Brotherhood of Tailors. In January, garment workers in New York City had gone out on strike. Factory owners in the Big Apple decided to send work to Rochester in an effort to avoid the striking workers. Unions were forbidden in the Rochester garment industry. Union leaders from New York City came to Rochester, asking them to stand up against the factory owners. The workers in Rochester agreed to support the strike, but they wanted union recognition, the 8-hour day, and a pay raise. Ida and her father were among the first to walk off the job. Ida joined picketers in front of a sweatshop on Clifford Street. The picketers were there to protest the shop's workers who were not taking part in the strike. The shop owner, Valentine Sauter, fired a rifle into the crowd of picketers. Ida was struck by the boss's bullet and killed. She was only 18 years old. That night, she was supposed to have her engagement party. The community was outraged. 5,000 people attended her funeral. Mass rallies were held across the area. While no one was ever held accountable for her death, Ida's murder became a rallying cry for the striking workers. They continued to fight until April, when they won the right to join a union.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, carpetbagger Alan West. Remember Alan West, the congressman from Florida? Evidently now Alan West is the state party chair for the Republican Party of Texas. You know they're different states, right? Evidently he wants and has endorsed the idea of Texas seceding from the Union and being its own country. And, I've had people say, this is a great idea. You should let him go. I don't know. I don't know that I want to see the whole U.S. broken up into 6 different countries where we're going to end up in war scenarios with each other. And then you have to wonder, if they do secede, do we allow them to keep the military bases, or do we bomb them? I mean, if they're going to be a whole nother country, we can't leave that infrastructure behind, because our tax dollars are no longer going to at all support it, and all of that has to come back. And here's the other part of it: if we are moving towards a green economy of solar panels and wind and tidal and all of that stuff, and Texas has oil, we don't need it. So I mean, there's part of me that goes, I don't know, goodbye. But there's the other part of me that's the unity part going, you know what? I do know a lot of people who are Democrats in Texas. It is a state that is changing. Maybe there will be some sanity in the coming months and years. And maybe the Republicans will find themselves, coming back to sanity. Like, look, talking with Bob, Newt Gingrich and the wave that Bob came in back in 94, they don't seem so radical now. I remember when Ronald Reagan was president. He was the most radical president of the era. He brought in, horrible, bad ideas that seemed tame by today's standards. He seemed almost rational compared. Now, granted, he had memorized his lines and all of that, but still almost rational. he actually, to throw it out there, he actually signed the earned income tax credit that helped low-wage workers get extra money. You can't get many Republicans doing it. That's socialism. So crazy, interesting times. So much to get to. This weekend, the big game. We're going to be taking a little break for the weekend so that we can see the big game. But if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back next week for the big impeachment. Thanks so much for being here.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.